Welcome, Susanna. Thank you so much for making time for us.
Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
I'm excited because we had a brief little chat before the we let everyone else in and the camera started rolling. But I was saying how I first encountered Susanna in my friend Michael Lucas's year-long novel writing workshop. And in the course of that, I got to see like two passages out of Susanna's book, and those two scenes really kind of very much stuck in my mind. Like they kind of quite haunted my mind. The first was a scene where you actually see the world for the first time. And I just had never seen that or even remotely imagined that. And it was so very graphic to me. And lovely, your prose is so lyrical. So that creation of this very otherly world was beautiful. And then the other scene that really stuck with me was the scene where she starts painting again, because Bo, your protagonist, is an artist. And I kind of want to start there in a way. So at some point before we turned up to Michael's class, you had the idea for this book. Can you tell me where the idea came from and why it came and how it came?
Yeah, well, kind of. Um, so it's so funny that we're talking and you have now seen really two ends of the book because 2018, Michael's class, January, was really when I started this book in earnest. So I think leading up to the class, I remember feeling really nervous about am I going to pay for this class and commit to a whole year? It was really scary for me, and I decided to do it. And that got me to sit down and start thinking about what I had generated, I don't know, like thousands of pages of garbage essentially for years. And I kind of went through it and tried to find what still feels alive, what do I want to carry forward. So I came with some scraps and I had a sense of the world. I had a sense of these two characters. And that was really it. But it came, yeah, I don't know. It came from my garbage pile, I guess, of all the thoughts that I had had in writing for almost a decade.
So this is interesting. So in 2018, you start writing, working on it more seriously, and you accumulated what you call the garbage pile. I mean, but the two scraps that I saw were like, we're not talking garbage here. So that goes back to 2008. In 2008, this book, for anyone who hasn't read it, the protagonist is an artist, and you have like maybe the shortest note on the author I've ever seen in a book. I got to that page and it cracked me up. The author's note says, Susanna Kwan is an artist and writer from San Francisco. Awake in the Floating City is her first novel. Whereas I've like written reams and reams and reams of stuff about myself. So I wanted to ask you about that. And when you first started writing your garbage in 2008 around, were you already an artist?
I was an artist first. In college and high school, I was taking visual art classes and I guess writing the whole time, but I didn't think that I would like be a writer. So that definitely came first. That's where most of my training started from, informal training. And the bio is very short. I don't know about you, but I just really cringe when anyone reads a bio about me. But I have an acknowledgement section, and I certainly went through many different communities and classes and just, my own reading, my own education, and all of that is what got me here. I think the official bio is hard to represent all of that, but it is absolutely like why I was able to finish the book.
Hmm.
Once I started writing, I stopped drawing and painting, so it's kind of like I didn't have enough time to do both things.
Right.
I'm hoping there's space to bring them together or to fit in some more visual stuff because I really do miss that. But luckily my character helped me live some of the visual experiences, even if I couldn't do it myself.
Very selfishly, I was like, oh, I need to talk to Susanna about this very selfishly because I also paint as well as write, and um recently I found something that I wrote a letter actually to my current husband. We were, friends at that time, but I found a letter talking about um what I was trying to accomplish in a very highfalutin kind of theoretical sense and how I couldn't decide whether I was Shirin the painter or Shirin the writer, but I couldn't find a way of being both. I never felt like I always felt like it had to be one or the other, and I didn't know which one I was. And so I was really interested to see for you, seeing as painting is such a big part of this book, um, whether you at the time when you started writing saw yourself as a painter first or a writer first. Yeah.
So when I started this project, I had been writing. So I took my first class in 2005 at this tiny Asian American arts organization in San Francisco called Kearney Street Workshop. And I had never taken a writing class. I had some compulsion to sign up. I don't know, I think the course description was really compelling. And I started reading short stories and writing, my first attempts at fiction. And I just fell in love with that form. And I repeated this class two more times,
Wow.
um, which kind of made my teacher, I guess, have to develop some new material because I kept coming back. And then from there, I did an MFA program for a few years. So I was working on short fiction. And after I graduated, I wasn't sure what I was writing. Like, I didn't actually feel that interested in the short story form. And that's, really what you do in graduate school. It's not set up for novels. I didn't have a novel in me at the time, but I knew that I needed to keep writing. And so I did that for myself, mostly by myself in private for many years, which is when I started generating those pages. So eventually I found myself to the book and I was a writer by then. I was all the free time I had, could only go to one of those things. And that's what I had invested the most in and felt like I could express myself best in.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
so yeah, even by then I hadn't been doing anything visual for about a decade.
Hmm. Hmm. So then, how did you find Michael's class?
Oh gosh, I don't know. I think a friend saw it maybe on a Facebook group and she emailed me and I think said, "What do you think?" And this might have been, did he run it multiple years?
Yeah, he
I think
did.
I might have thought about it for a year. So yeah, I was ruminating for a long time and like December would come around all those years after grad school and I'd just be like, I didn't write a book yet. Like how do you actually do this? So I knew I needed the structure and the accountability.
Uh-huh. Um, so that was the first time you'd ever worked with Michael in that.
Yeah,
That's great. Yeah, big fan of Michael, and he's going to come and do a revision workshop for us in January to kick our year off. So
lucky
we're
all of you. He's a fantastic teacher.
yeah, he's a great teacher. So because they're all, it's the people in this room are all writers. So I'm always interested in kind of like picking through the different aspects of the writing experience. And not everybody in this room will have been through a course like Michael's, right? Did you find it? um, You're going on. I'm taping you, and I'm a friend of his, but you can still be honest. Did you find it very? Did you find it very helpful? Like, did it give you that structure that you were looking for? Did it? Uh, was the pacing kind of working for you in that sense?
It helped me tremendously, I think, in a few different ways. Um, One is, so we met once a month. I think it was like a Wednesday night in Berkeley. And we only were up for workshop discussion, I think, twice in the year. And so the thing that helped me the most was actually being assigned a writing buddy. We had these rotating writing buddies, and we had words due, I think, every week. Um, and that fear of a deadline really was what motivated me to keep at it. I did an event with Michael earlier this year to promote my novel, and I was bringing up how I think the promise of the class was at the end of this year, you'll have a draft of a novel, and you can see how long it took me to actually finish the book and to have a whole book. But it was, I left that class with, an entire frame. And I had these characters. I knew so much more about them. I was watching other people struggling through trying to write a book and celebrating, alongside. And I think having company, having the deadlines, having an assigned writing buddy, and then twice having some feedback, to
Hmm.
say, I think I can see what you're doing here. What I was writing, uh, one of the tricky things is my process is very non-linear. And so I just had these scraps that were coming from all these different times. And I didn't even know really, I think, the timeline of the book. And so to present pages for a class to actually look at was tricky. But I think that exercise of knowing eyes would be on it and we would be having a conversation, and all of these people are writers who are also thinking about how to write a novel, that really got me to sit down in a way that I don't think I would have done on my own. And
Hmm.
there's like a little bit of pain in paying for it too, and I think that's effective for me. It's like I'm gonna invest in this for myself, and I'm gonna show up for myself, and I have to show up for everyone else too.
Hmm. So it sounds like you started that class with a whole accumulation of scraps that you don't kind of think or work linearly. But by the time you left that class, you said you had a structure. How did you fall on, okay, first of all, let's talk about what structure. Did you come away with like a plot that you knew the shape of the book? Did you come away thinking, okay, now I know what the theme is and what I'm trying to say and what it is I want to explore? Like when you left that class, how much of it had fallen into place? Because I think that a lot of writers have these beautiful scenes, or these impressions that they have and that they can write them down, but the challenge of pulling it all together and kind of really finding out what the book is about is, a huge challenge. And if you can't quite get that, I think the book for the reader is never quite satisfying. So how did you actually get all your scraps to lock into place and figure out what it is that you're after? And I just want to say, by the way, that the novel that I was writing at that time is the novel that just sold. So I actually took longer than you did.
Yeah, which I just love hearing these stories because it takes a long time to figure out what you're saying and then to do it in language that other people can receive. I know people write books much faster than the years and years that it took us, but it's yeah, it's really I think just more reflective of my reality that it's a long haul and you have to be able to sit with all of that uncertainty and like keep making these. I made so many beautiful paragraphs that I threw away, so many. But I think that over the years, months, weeks, as the words accumulate, you can start to see what they're saying to you. And for me, I think the questions, the themes were maybe always there. Like I am interested in art and what its role is and like what an artist is supposed to do in the world or who they're supposed to be. I was interested in the history of San Francisco as somebody who has lived here almost my entire life. There's just so much of my own experience that has been shaped by my family stories, my own years living here, like the research I've done, the reading I've done. So I knew I was obsessed about that. And then I was watching, people in my family and my community aging and getting sick and dying and realizing, oh gosh, we're losing all of these stories like in a really personal and intimate way, but also like society is losing entire worlds that are so rich and that actually like made the world that I'm living in. So once I was um once I had accumulated enough words, I could see that and it wasn't a surprise to me, right? I was like, of course I've been thinking about these things my entire life and in the entire time I've been putting words onto pages. Um, And this all became much clearer as I got closer and closer to the finish line of, things in my personal life lining up with the things in the book. And I was like, oh my God, of course, I've been writing. This is the project it's been all along. It just took me a long time to see it whole. I think what I came out of the frame that I came out of that class with was very, very simple. It was this book takes place over the course of a year. But I didn't know that, right? Because I was writing scenes that took place in like 1906 in San Francisco and, after World War II. And I I thought that maybe those were, their own sections, but really they ended up being maybe a paragraph or a couple of pages. So it sounds very basic, but it took a really long time to understand that this is a book about these two characters that I already had a sense of, but it's about their relationship and not, all of these other things that I had been exploring and the images that had come to me in the conversations that I had written down, thinking, oh, this is so interesting. Well, it just ended up having nothing to do with that core relationship and the place that was so important to these two characters.
Okay, so that is a really good segue into my next set of questions because I, as I was reading the book, I was wondering, like, why, on a very personal level, why did you choose, why are we looking at Bo and Mia? Yeah. 'Cause it's a very compelling relationship and it's a really interesting relationship. I don't think it is a very typical relationship. So it required a leap of imagination on the author's part, I'm sure, to even land on those two protagonists. So you said that you had been experiencing in your personal life, your family members aging and losing some of them. But Mia is not a family member, right? So what made you what brought these two people together on your page?
It's a really good question. So my grandmother, um, I took some of her biographical information and I used her for the character of Mia because so many of the stories that I had heard about her, secondhand and third hand were just sort of since childhood fascinating to me, but I never was able to talk to her directly because of language barriers, because she was actually like a pretty difficult person to be in a relationship with. Um, but there was something about her stories and this generation of Chinese women who immigrated here after World War II and like lived in San Francisco, Chinatown, lived in other neighborhoods in later years. There was something about that generation that I was really interested in. And then I realized the story took place in the future. There was a time when I thought Bo and Mia were actually never going to meet. They were going to have their own distinct parts, but they were going to be connected by this apartment building. But it turned out that it was much more powerful to actually put them in a direct relationship with one another, even though, so Mia, for those of you who don't know, she's 130 years old. So she's like very, very old. And in our reality, people are, people can get to around there, but not very many. But for the purposes of this book, I wanted them to have this relationship. Um, Another thing that when I look back, I realize definitely informed the book is in 2017, I participated in this task force that was planning the next 50 years of transportation in the San Francisco Bay Area. And it was like this massive year-long project, and all of these different agencies came together, all of these different stakeholders. And I was there as a public transit user from District 1 in San Francisco, like a very, very small part, but I learned so much about, um, the work we did together was like trying to collectively imagine what the future might look like and how we're going to get there and what unexpected things might happen and what technologies are going to be developed. And so that I think really helped me shape a version of San Francisco that held those questions. One of the field trips we took as part of that task force was we went to this like inventor studio, but we were asking this question about the future of work. And there were some really cool inventions, but the thing that I really took away with it was the question of what's actually not going to change, and that's that we're always going to need care, right? We're always going to be born, we're always going to die, always going to get sick somewhere in between, injured. Um, and so, actually, pretty early on, I realized it was going to be a caregiving relationship. During the years that I wrote this book, I was kind of on and off taking care of my mother. She was getting older. She had always had a lot of health problems. And then I sold this book with my agent in 2023, March, I think. And a couple of months later, I was deep into these revisions, the hardest revisions of my life. And my mom got really sick and she started hospice care. And then I became her full-time caregiver for almost a year in a way where I was like, oh my God, my book is coming. It's coming true. Like, I've heard about this happening to fiction writers where they're writing, for years and then that world just starts to happen to them. And of course, it's not predicting the future. It's that you're paying attention to what matters to you. You're noticing the world around you. Um, and so most of the book, the book was basically done, but I was making it stronger. I was, adding some things, taking things out. But I realized, like Bo, I was in this building in San Francisco for a year taking care of somebody who was dying.
Mhm.
So I realized, again, in hindsight, I was writing this book in part to teach myself how to do that and to engage with these questions of like, if the crisis is personal, if it's climate crisis, if it's we have so many crises that we're living in right now, and there's always going to be these challenges. So like, what is it that's going to keep us connected to the people in our lives? Like, how are we going to take care of each other? What are the ways that we do that? Um,
I was really interested that Bo had had some very good training about how to um, diffuse situations, like and not escalate. There's one point in the book where she actually thinks, okay, how am I going to de-escalate this? De-escalate this, and for a little while she goes and washes dishes or something, and then she's got her spidey sense out trying to figure out what's happening with Mia, and she still doesn't feel like the air in the room is quite right. So she completely relies on that intuition. In the writing of the book, that intuition as to what the sense of the room is when nobody's saying anything is recognized as a real thing and not a figment of imagination or paranoia, which my husband sometimes thinks it is. But anyway, what really interested me was that she then says something. And it allows for like this little gear shift because they're no longer talking about what has upset them both. And it kind of gets them around that kind of moment. And I was wondering, as I read that, whether you had received any of that training, because um, uh, it's so hard to do to take care of someone and to keep your patience. I'm not very good at it, but it's so I was really interested in how good Bo was at it. Bo, was does a really good job.
She does do a really good job. She's a very good observer of what's happening around her, and that's something that, draws her to her creative projects, but it's also something that makes her great with taking care of people. I think another reason their relationship works well is because, they're not relatives, right? They don't have all this baggage that they're bringing into it, and they can kind of come to each other as whole people and do the caregiving relationship, and of course it becomes something deeper. But there's a librarian in this book, a character who plays a small role or a big role, and she, I mean, I see caregivers and librarians and public servants as kind of having these similar skill sets of working with all kinds of people within a community, and like knowing, recognizing all of these personalities and moods and unexpected things, and being able to approach them with grace and
Mhm.
with skill, with training. For me, I don't have any, like official caregiving training. I learned what I learned on the job, and sort of felt like I was like 50% a nurse by the end of it. But
Mhm.
um, and that helped me with some of the details in the book, but largely they were there because there are so many caregivers among us. There are so many public servants among us, and just talking to those people, reading the work that they've put out there, hearing them talk in interviews, like you just get a sense that there are many, many people within our societies who are paying really close attention, recognize need where it's needed. Um, Yeah, but she is. There are many times when I wish I could be kind of as graceful as her in turning a conversation, using distraction. I think another thing about her taking care of older people is, something that I was noticing in the year of taking care of my mother as she was dying. So many people from her life came to visit. It was really actually a wonderful and profound experience. And I just started to notice, most of the people I spend time with are, like closer in age to me than to her. And I just saw people like letting go of grudges, and like the things that I was concerned about, like just didn't matter in the scheme of things. It kind of gives you this perspective. So I think that for both of them, for Bo as somebody who is good at her job, her personality is suited for it, and someone like Mia, who is at the end of her life and like taking stock of things, going through a really big transition. Um, it's easy to actually, you get upset and then you move on. You get upset, you move on. You are having a hard day, and then you wake up and you do another day.
Did 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 you have Bo's internal dilemma about um not being able to leave right from the beginning?
No, no, that came much later. Um,
Did you know from page to page whether she was going to go as you were writing?
I had no idea. I actually had to weave all of that in. I like told you I had the characters and the place, and then eventually I had the year that it takes place in. So like there was a container, but getting from a beginning to an end was really hard. And then God, I don't know when it was, but I just thought, oh God, I had so many different responses to Bo over the years. And like the one I'm closest to now is like, why didn't you leave? Like you have this family, they live in Vancouver. There's nobody in San Francisco left for you. Like you're young, you have a future. And that kind of that part of me and my relationship with my character, I think is where that like plot point came from. And there was a draft, the first draft I showed to anybody, I showed it to my writing group, and um, the staying and leaving like incidents were maybe 2 pages long. And then I ended up realizing she's going to have to struggle with this for the entire book. So then it was a painstaking process of trying to like manufacture that entire storyline inside of what I already had. And it fit there, right? It made sense for her. It made sense to me anyway. Um, but I think it took many, many passes to actually make that
Yeah.
um, feel like it was part of the entire book when I didn't know about it
It
for
does.
years.
It does feel like part of the book, and it feels like it's so funny with books that you get at the other end of them and you think, well, how did this work without it? Do you know what I mean? Because it gives so much tension to that book, the fact that you don't know as a reader what she's going to decide, and you're afraid for her because one way or the other you have an opinion, and you're afraid she's not going to do what you think she should do, and then you survive like that decision point, and then so many pages down the road, she's facing it again, and you're again afraid for her. So it adds a lot of tension. I thought though, being an author myself, it did make there was something about it that did make me recognize. I was like, I wonder if Susanna knew what she was going to decide of whether you were discovering. Because I have always said, I'm not a plotter at all. I'm a pantser. I'm not a complete pantser though. I usually don't start something until I know where I want to start and where I want to end. And then I don't know what's going on in the middle. And a lot of times by the time I get to the end, the ending's changed. But at least when I start off, I think I know where I'm going. Um, but it's like I always think that if I plot things out too much, if I ever try to plot things out too much, they actually die on the vine for me a bit because it's that discovery that keeps it so alive. And I was wondering if I was sensing that in the depiction of Beau's dilemma, that you were actually writing to find out what she was going to decide. But,
Yeah, I I absolutely was. And I think you can tell like my priorities are, they're visible on the page, and I think that that's part of what makes every book so unique, and is just being able to see like the mind at work over time, the places that I think the strongest elements of a work will just show you what matters to the writer the most. And it's kind of what makes it really beautiful to be a reader and to experience that perspective.
on that point, I'm going to ask you about um, the art in it, right? There's quite a lot of time spent on what's going on with Bo as an artist. Um, were you at any point worried that you would leave? I mean, for me, it worked great because I paint, and I was like, "Ooh," and I got all excited about cyanotype again, all that kind of thing. But were you ever worried that for readers who weren't artists, that this might leave them behind or leave them out in any way?
Um, I would say I was aware of readers who might struggle with it. And for me, like the most important thing was to try to put the technical um, information there in a way that was always coming through Beau's perspective, but was also like enough visual information for the reader to build it in their head. And I don't think that it always works. I got a message from some readers this week that, said all the things that they were drawn to in the book. And then there was a comment like about the cyanotypes, like, we don't know what was happening with that blue thing. Is that a futuristic thing? Um, so I, I I think I always knew that it wasn't going to work for everyone. I knew um, before. Okay, so I knew the project that she ended up finishing at the end of the book, and I was working my way there. When I sold the book and started working with my editor, she was pointing out very smartly the ways that the project wasn't working. And we had these conversations about it, and then I spent months basically rebuilding the entire thing. So it ended in the same place. She is the same person she is, but the actual like physical thing she was doing changed to make more logical sense. Um, Yeah, so I'm sorry to the people where it is kind of more of a struggle to see it all. I think it worked enough for me and for many of my early readers that I let it be.
hmm hmm So this is actually a really good segue into the more business part of this whole equation. So you said that you sold the book in March 2023. When did you find your, well, actually, let's go back to when you left Michael's class. That was in 2018, was it, that class?
Mhm.
So you kept writing, you kept working on it for 5 years. You had said that you really liked the writer buddy system. Did you have a writers group that you were writing with regularly? Did a group come out of that class?
Yeah, there were a few of us who ended up meeting for another year. Um, I think we all lived in San Francisco, and none of us were done with our novels. So we definitely kept up, the structure there. That year, I also joined the Ruby, which is this community in San Francisco of women and non-binary and trans feminine creatives. And that community was so helpful in giving me, seeing people around me working on these long-term projects. There's so many different life circumstances and perspectives, and that was a huge part of kind of staying in it. And another writing group came out of that community too. And so I was like, I can't actually do two writing groups. So I ended up um, no longer meeting with the group that had come out of the 2018 class, although in 2019 it was very helpful.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I've had that second writing group. We're still meeting regularly. We go on a retreat once a year. We exchange work, but not like according to a schedule. It's kind of what does everybody need? Does somebody have a book? Does somebody have an essay? Maybe we'll just talk about what we've been reading. So it's a very flexible format. Um, and then I also had to invent a lot of accountability systems for myself. There was a friend of mine from grad school who's a poet, and we had this shared Google Drive called Proselets. And I think every Sunday we had Proselets due from the week. So that was kind of another way of making sure I was writing. And I had a draft exchange with a friend. We promised each other that in a few months we would give each other the worst books ever. So like the pressure was off because
Right.
already going to be the worst book. And so that enabled us to just kind of power through this draft. So that's how I came up with my first draft. I also did my very first residency in 2021. So I was deep in the writing of it, and that was amazing. I've been working full time through all of this, and it's hard, right? It's weekends, it's vacations, it's
Mm-hmm.
nighttime, it's early morning. So I managed to maneuver my life to have this 1 month in Alaska in this cabin where this chef was making me breakfast, lunch, and dinner. It was unbelievable. I just, life isn't really like that. But that enabled me to do like a year's worth of work in just a single month.
Right.
Um, so that was a really big, moment in the book's life. Um, And there was also, I haven't, my very good friends live next door, and one of them also needed to get some stuff done. So we had this pact for a few months. I think it was like winter of 2021, going into 2022, and we would text each other at 6 a.m., be like, "Are you awake? Are you over there?" And then get to work. And that, it only, a system only lasts for so long. So, for a project like a book, you just have to keep figuring out what's going to work for your current life circumstance. So I
Mhm.
tried a lot of different things, and I needed them all.
It's not, they sound great. I mean, it's usually when I ask this question to authors, they've tried like one or two things, and so there are only one or two tips to give. But you just rattled off like all these different ways you could go about helping yourself as an author get more work done.
I wish I only needed one, but unfortunately, I needed more.
So tell me about then the moment where you have your draft and you decide you're going to look for an agent. Like, what was the agent hunt like for you?
Yeah, so I did this MFA program from 2009 to 2011, and like never once thought about the business side of things. And I actually just kind of ignored that question until I had gone through so many drafts of my own novel, and I had really reached the limits of my abilities, and I couldn't look at it anymore. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't see it. But I think that what I have is clear enough that somebody else will be able to see what I'm doing. So maybe, I had a sense that I was getting there. I was like pushing through one more revision. Um, I had a big trip, international trip coming up. And I thought, okay, I'm going to make the leap. So I had collected in a spreadsheet some names of agents, just from reading books and, kind of Googling a little bit on the internet. And I sent out a couple of queries. I also spent all this time like studying the query because it's like I don't know this form. I don't understand it. It's like very painful for me to write in that way. So that took a lot of effort. And then I managed to do it. It probably took me around like 2 months, just for a little email. But I sent it out to a couple of agents, and then in the morning, I had requests to see the full. So I was like, oh gosh, I better just send it to all of these people that I have listed here in the spreadsheet, before I go on this trip, because like I don't know what's going to happen. So let's just jump. The query at least is good enough to spark some interest. So I emailed, I think it was like 20 agents, and a couple of those were people who were introduced to me by friends who had read my book. And they just said, whenever you're ready, I'd be happy to, introduce you to see if you might be a good fit. So that was really generous and so kind. And then I went on this trip, and about 10 days later, I had my first offer. And I was very surprised. I was gearing myself up to, you know, do this for years, throw the book away and start a new one, because it's really hard to finish a book, and then it's really hard to find the right team to put it into the world in this as a commercial product. Like those are really different things. And I have at this point been in around enough writers that I know like not there's no guarantee, right? The only control you have is over your own work, and then you try to send it out in the world, and you see if you can find the people who understand what you're doing and have the ability to put it in the hands of readers, whoever they are. So yeah, it was surprising. And then from there, I let the other people I had reached out to know, and I ended up, half of them I never heard from. I ended up with, I think it was 4 offers. So I had conversations with everybody, and that was sort of the first step in letting go of the book and seeing how it was landing in other people's brains. And I think any of those agents would have been wonderful to work with. I was really lucky to be able to compare and to feel like, okay, what feels really right to me? I spoke with one agent who had really smart ideas about the book, but then I talked to another agent and I thought, oh no, she understands the soul of the book. And if I made those other changes, I think maybe I would have been moving farther away from what I intended, although, maybe I would have been happy to do it. So yeah, it was a very revealing process. But I ended up going with the
You
person. Sorry, go ahead.
Did you
Uh,
know what you were looking for in an agent as you got into it, like as you approached it? Did you have like a list of, oh, I want to know these things about them and how they operate, or was it much more intuitive than that? Just
I
what
going
kind of
into
speak up?
it, I was sort of like, yeah, I had researched, who they represented and like the types of books that were on their lists, but it was kind of a surprising process. It was really about the relationship between my book and how they and them. And really less about, their entire careers. I think that that's been true for this particular book at every stage is who understands the heart of what I'm doing. My agent Mariah was able to reflect more than I could ever actually do myself, what I was trying to do. And of course she has like, you know, she's very, very good at her job. And I'm just here on the writerly side and as a reader and as, an artist. But she understands, she could see where the book fit into this landscape of published books. And so, yeah,
How did she describe that to you? How did she characterize that to you? Do you remember?
I don't remember, but I she wrote me a series of very, very, very long, beautiful emails, like the longest emails I've ever received in my life. So I can't actually summarize them, but I've never felt more seen.
Oh, that's lovely.
Yeah. I mean, after publishing the book, I've been really lucky to have a number of really insightful reviews, but I really, they're short, and Mariah's emails they had a lot more space, and a real, it's just been a real gift in my writing life to find somebody who can advocate for me in the business world, but who also, I mean, luckily, I'm not relying on this book for my living because I think that gave me a lot of freedom to just not worry about any of the business commercial
Mhm.
stuff and
Well,
all of.
that raises an interesting question, which is one that I often ask my writers, which is, what did you want out of it? Because obviously, it sounds like and some people go, oh, I want a bestseller, or I want to like make $1 million or whatever. Sounds like that wasn't what you were after. Was it much more, was it art? Like, was it creating something and having your creation separate from you and then live out there? Like, yeah. What?
The living out there, uh, I think that it took a long time for me to actually understand that part because I was doing it for the art. I was doing it for myself for a long time. I mean, some part of me must have known that I wanted to make a book that other people would read. But, I have a lot of friends who are poets who write, who create work, that just moves me tremendously. And those are not, people don't read poetry generally in the world. Their work is not, the reach of it is limited. And I sort of saw, I remember an early conversation with my agent where I just thought, well, I would just like if 300 people just like read my little poetry novel. So those were really, I didn't have big ambitions, um, but of course I put all of this time into something and then, in the later revisions, it really did become like, could somebody else see what I'm doing, what I'm trying to express here? And yeah, somewhere along the line, I started having a bigger view of it. But I think that artistic integrity has always been the first priority.
Hmm. Hmm. Did you talk about your agent? She sounds wonderful. What was the relationship with the editor like? Oh, I think first I just jumped. So so then you go out on submission. What was that process like?
Yeah, so I signed on with my agent and we worked on a couple of rounds of revision for I think 4 months. Made the book stronger, and then we sent it out on submission. She sent it out on submission, and we got a whole bunch of rejections right away, which was expected. Um, and then an offer about a week and a half later. And it was, I have friends whose books have taken a very long time to sell, and I was gearing up for that. I have friends whose books haven't sold, and I know that there are beautiful, beautiful books out there, some of which I've read that will not be published. Um, so I didn't know it was going to happen, and those 10 days were just agonizing, even though really that's very fast. But I ended up having a conversation with my editor, Naomi Gibbs, and she, like Mariah, reflected to me everything that was important to me in the book. Um, she also had very good ideas for how to make it stronger. And they were not things that felt like compromises. I was afraid of being asked to, make changes that were going to take away from what I was trying to do. And it was never a case of that. Um, and one of the things I wanted most was actually to work closely with an editor. I hadn't done that before. I had published very little before this book. I had worked with like one editor on a short story, and it was a thrill. I do a lot of editing in my day job, and to be on the other side of that and to work with someone who has helped all of these other people with like the structures of their book and with just things that I had no experience with was part of why I wanted to publish a book in the first place, was to have that relationship and to like grow as a writer who could only do so much on her own. Um, so we worked together for, I don't know, I think it was maybe 3 rounds, but it was like kind of two bigger rounds. And she wrote me these edit letters that were just these maps and these like comfort documents. And, it's hard too, right? Because you're being shown your weaknesses and there's so much work to do. I was, as I mentioned earlier, it was the most stressful time in my life. And I was trying to fit this into, it was like my third job essentially. But I learned a lot during the process, including how many different ways a book can go depending on who you're working with. Um,
Right.
yeah, but I really treasure the editorial process that I got to experience. I'm very lucky.
How collaborative were they with things like your cover design and, did they involve you in the larger process? I've had publishers who do, and I've had publishers who kind of like go, okay, this is what it's going to look like. So what was your experience?
I think it was kind of in between. There were, um, I mean, it was kind of a long process. This was also a period of my life where I've forgotten so many things, but there was actually a designer in the book who, I don't know if she went on vacation or what happened, but it got reassigned to another designer. And I didn't hear anything for like a month. And then this cover basically just showed up in my inbox one day. And I was like, oh, yeah, that's it. And it's another case of some stranger out there who's very good at their job, understands the book. This is never like I had put together like a mood board. They'd asked for a mood board, and I never made one before. So I was like collecting all these covers and paintings. and this looks nothing like anything that I collected. It's better. We did a little bit of adjustment to the text a couple of times, but yeah, this was another real gift of the publishing process of getting this nice jacket. Um, and I was lucky to have the book sell in the UK, and then I got another jacket, and then they made one for Australia as like a bonus. And so yeah, that's for all of us.
I was wondering whether it was, I'm glad you had such a positive like relation experience because being someone I paint and I used to be a creative director in advertising, so I have very strong opinions about aesthetics and stuff. Um, and in my children's books anyway, it's been really interesting. I remember the first time I saw Sophie Blackgold's cover for Ruby's Wish, I was just like, that's it. And but there have been other covers that I didn't really have like that. So I was thinking that being a painter yourself, being an artist yourself, like were your visual expectations like very high? Or I mean, were you ever worried that you would end up with a cover that you didn't like? Because in most contracts, I'm not sure about yours, but in most contracts, the publisher makes it very clear that they will, I think that the term is like meaningful discussion, that they'll have meaningful discussion with the author, but the
Yeah,
decision is theirs.
I looked at my contract. It was like, yeah, meaningful, something with a C. I
Conversation.
was, yeah, yeah, it was it. I was worried. This book is a very visual book, and I really wanted readers to see something that would be an accurate reflection in some way of what was inside. But I also have no experience with like graphic design, like art direction. I definitely was excited to leave it up to the professionals. And yeah, again, it's like interesting to imagine. I didn't see very many like ideas before this one, and so yeah, who knows what direction it could have gone in. But yeah, I was happy to kind of
Mhm.
step back and trust, and it worked out in this,
Yeah.
yeah,
That
circumstance.
I always love that. I always love that feeling, in any creative work where it comes back better than where you could have got it yourself. That moment of, oh yeah, this is better. That always.
Especially after working alone for so long, like to be in collaboration with amazing people, like what a dream.
Hmm. Hmm. So the book came out in, was it June?
May.
May. Came out in May. How was that? How was the launch? What was the most exciting moment in this whole journey?
Well, the launch itself was pretty exciting in a busy way. I had a launch event the night before the book came out officially at Green Apple in San Francisco. That was very special because I have been attending events there for ages. I grew up in San Francisco. I've been going there since I was very, very young. So that it just felt like a very important moment. And then there were people from like all these different parts of my life there to celebrate with me. People know that I'm a writer, but it's not until now that I've actually had something to show for it, which is its own thing. But to be able to have all these warm faces in the room to acknowledge this achievement was great. And then I had a good number of other events online and in person, and it's really cool to have conversations with other writers who can talk beautifully about what it is, like all these different aspects of like the questions that you're asking, to be kind of invited into or to initiate those conversations, is a different phase, in my creative journey. I think I've had some readers reach out, just total strangers telling me about what the book has meant to them, and that I think has been my favorite part. That's like a quieter thing. It's on its own schedule.
Mhm.
I have actually never written to a writer to tell them that I loved their book, and now I just think, oh, I should be doing that for all the ones who are alive, because you just have no idea like what's
Yeah.
happening. Like I know the book is getting checked out to the library, but like whose brain is it in, and is it doing anything there? Um, it's all out of my control. So when people have reached out, it's been um, really, really moving, and lets me know like, oh, I did um mean to write a book. I did mean to reach people. I just like didn't know exactly how it was going to play out. Like it's not something that you can predict.
Mhm.
But as a person who has been moved by art and books, like it makes sense, and it's very fortunate to be for a little bit on that side of things,
Mhm.
creator side of things.
So,
Yeah.
so where to now?
Where to now? Um, I am reading again, and in a way that has nothing to do with my book, that is done. So I feel like kind of a new person. I've got
Mhm.
some big questions that are starting to formulate in my head. So I'm trying to follow those interests. It's exciting because I haven't been in this stage in like a decade, essentially.
Right. I know. I'm hanging to be able to read again.
Yeah, yeah, you're gonna get there pretty soon. But it is kind of a sense of freedom. And then this year I started a teaching collective with four of my friends who are writers, Rachel Kong, Shruti Swami, and Mung Jin. And we are learning so much from each other as artists and teachers. We did our first retreat back in August in San Francisco. We're planning our own year-long novel generator next year. So I don't know, it's very exciting to have four different, very different brains on the job. And it's not, it's not my novel, but it is a very creative project that is sort of giving me this energy that I haven't felt in a long time, and I haven't done this kind of collaborative work before. So that's a really big thing that is sitting with me as I kind of transition from one project to hopefully another big one of my own.
Mhm.
And then just, doing my day job and being a person. I've had to cancel or skip so many events over the years in order to get the work done on this book. And I really miss I really miss having these weekends where I can just spend the whole day like spending time with the people who mattered to me, or just wandering around. I used the word freedom earlier, and it does feel like um it does feel like a special protected time, but I can't live here forever if I want to write another book.
Oh, but you should enjoy your time there. You forgot to mention something though, and that is that you have a retreat coming up, right?
Yeah, yeah. So the friends that I'm doing this collaborative teaching project with, we're called the Dream Side, and we are dreaming up a retreat in a national forest in Oregon. It's going to be this spring, end of March, beginning of April. So yeah, we're busy at work planning that in addition to the novel class. Um, I'm not sure what other programs we will run in 2026. Those are big ones, but yeah, if any of you are interested, please reach out.
How should they reach out? Can they email you through your website?
Yeah, you can use my contact form on susannakwan.com. And then the Dream Side has a website, thedreamside.com. And
Dreamside is SIDE.
SIDE, thedreamside.com. We have a newsletter, so you're welcome to sign up, and we only send 4 newsletters a year, so we're not going to be spamming you, but that's a good way to, stay in touch and see what we're up to because we're not on social media either.
Good. But also you said that you're gonna have a landing page done in time for my November newsletter, so all of these people can read about it in my November newsletter too, right?
Yes, absolutely.
See, like the way I kind of prompted you to market yourself there.
Yeah, it was good. I'm the business stuff is hard for me.
It's hard for a lot of us. But we have now got 20 minutes left on the clock, and I promised everyone I'd leave them lots of time for their questions. So, why don't we hand over the mic? If you guys have questions, will you raise your hand the usual way, please? Cassia, you have done it.
Hi.
You can start.
Hi. I really like your book. I'm still reading it, but I'm really into it. I live in San Francisco, so I really liked how you described certain landmarks, but didn't really, write their names. I was wondering why you decided to just describe the landmarks. I mean, I knew them because I live in the city, but people who don't live here, they might not know. So I was wondering why you made that decision not to talk about, Golden Gate Park and uh, the Sharon Art Studio and things like that.
Oh.
I was very curious because, again, I know what you're talking about, but people who don't live here wouldn't know. Yeah.
Thank you for reading the book and noticing these details. I think that there were versions where I did name some of these places, and I think the San Francisco of this book it's definitely, I think, an extension of the version that I know, but it's also a totally made up place in
Yeah.
other ways, right? It's kind of an implausible situation. I kind of see it as this like suspended, like imaginative space. And yet I've tied all of this history to it. So, um, it's sort of like little, I think that San Francisco, people who know this city well, I was hoping that they would recognize some of it, but I also wanted it to just be something that readers could make up in their own heads, right? Like I grew up going to stained glass and figure drawing class at Sharon Art Studio. My mother took so many classes there. I spent so much time in the playground and in the park there, but that actually wasn't that's not what it was there to do in the book. So yeah, I'm glad that you could see them, and I hope there's all these other versions of whatever I described living in other readers' brains.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Aaron, you're next, but let me pop you on a spotlight as well so that you're not just talking.
Oh dear.
Hang on 1 second. I did the
Oh,
wrong.
don't spotlight me. My room's a mess. Don't
Okay.
spotlight me, please, please.
We won't look at your room.
Well, first, I apologize. I have not read the book. I am born and raised San Francisco, so I'm sure there'll be lots of resonance for me. Sharon, I wanted to just comment. Your questions are superb. How could I have anything more to ask? But Susanna, I love the way you talked about your relationship with your characters. And I wanted to ask you if they gave you any problems during the creative process. Oftentimes, we writers, we struggle with our characters who get really, really angry if we're going to kill them off or make them do something they don't want to do. I wondered if that was any part of your experience. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, they gave me a lot of problems. I think most of my frustration just came from not understanding who they were for so long. I was putting them into scenes, but not understanding why they were operating the way they did. They would make choices but then I also made them make choices, and we were both in charge. And that's kind of a hard place to be as somebody who is trying to create a work of art. Recently, I was looking at this paper I had taped up on the wall that was a map of all the characters, and there really aren't that many characters in this book, but there used to be a lot more. And there's sort of this like I don't know, spider web graphic, and there were parts where I kind of consolidated 5 characters into one. But then there's like a big X where I killed off even that consolidated character. And yeah, they're just trying to manage this world as somebody who invented it, but also as somebody who was just receiving it is one of the challenges and joys of being a writer who I guess is lucky enough to have those things to work with. But yeah, it was so many frustrations, so many challenges.
Thank you,
Still
Susanna.
don't,
Thank you so much.
I still don't actually know them completely, but yeah.
Thanks
How
for
can
your
you
question, Karen. Okay, Monica, now I'm going to spotlight you and I'm going to unspotlight myself because I just realized that in this conversation, I don't really need a place. So let me just pop off.
Oh.
Okay, Monica.
Okay. And that was nice because it made me remember not to unmute myself. Hi, Susanna. Thank you for talking with us. And thank you, Shirin, for setting this up. This is great. I did read, well, I didn't read, I listened to the audiobook, and I'm not quite done, but I'm like 70% finished. And it feels like it's sort of it's sort of ramping up a little bit here. So I see that it's getting more something. But the thing that really interested me about your book, and that I really wonder how you pulled it off, because I think it's pretty amazing, is so it feels to me like even though we never really meet Beau's mom, she is the central character in the relationship between Mia and Beau. And she is very much the motivation that Beau has for doing this art piece, because she didn't have the opportunity, or she didn't take the opportunity to get to know her own mom in the way that she has Mia. And so, and the fact that the two of them are, of the same generation, she sort of looks at the history. I mean, this is really so complicated to sort of pull those things together. And I felt like the fact that Mia was 130 years old, I had a little trouble with that, except it really makes the whole thing work really well, I thought, because it means that those experiences, those historical experiences that Beau wants to preserve, are ones that Mia has lived. So something that's far away from Beau is close to Mia. And Mia is a really prickly lady, and she needs Beau's empathy and caretaking. And the fact that Beau is able to do that for her, that makes the whole relationship work. But then what I really want to ask about is, how did you decide which themes to bring in to this relationship? Because it's all so personal, and I can imagine getting completely flummoxed with all the possibilities, and especially since you told us how much you wrote before this. So how did you narrow that down and put it in that container of those two relationships? I just wonder how you did that, because I think it's spectacular.
Thank you. Thank you for reading, listening, and for this question. I think one answer is it took like, I couldn't tell you how many revisions I actually did on this book, but I think a lot of what you are pointing out is a layering process, and it's something that you can't do in one sitting or one draft. It's something that has to kind of build, and then you look at it again. Now you know your characters a little bit more. Now you know the story a little bit more, so you can take a look at any scene or any paragraph really and think, does this belong here anymore? Maybe not. I'll put it here in case I need to put it back later. It's rare that you need to do that, but that I needed to do that. But it's kind of the big scale, constant, like redoing the whole thing, and then the micro scale of interrogating it after you have a stronger sense of the whole over and over and over again.
Mhm.
I think the themes, again, just kind of always were there. It was just a matter of like realizing it, seeing it, and then refining it over and over again. But that's really the work of it, for something that as long as a book. I think that's what everybody has to do to get to the thing that actually shines with the truth of what you were trying to say all along, but it took forever to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for doing it because I really enjoyed reading or
Thank
listening, I guess. Now I have to read it actually. It's complicated
Great.
to just listen to.
Yay, one book sold. All right, Lisa.
Hi, Susanna. Thanks so much for this. It was really very encouraging to hear about your process and your process writing this book. I was really interested in what you were saying about particularly writing for yourself and sort of writing your own way to what it was that you needed to say. And I love that. But I was wondering now you sold this book, if you're feeling this pressure now to write for this audience you've created, or if you're able to reel that back in and sort of go back into your writing hole and write for yourself again.
It's a great question, and I think it's one that I don't totally understand yet because I don't have a tangible project. And I wonder what kind of effect like this more public experience is going to have on my writing. I think for better or for worse, I actually don't know that much about um, like the outside world's expectation of the book or even or their response to it. Like I've read some reviews, I've heard from some people, but I also I don't really know who the audience is. Like I can't see them clearly as like a particular, type of reader. So there's some relief in that. I think also, not having it would be great to be able to make a living as a writer, but I also think that having that separation is going to protect whatever I'm doing as well. Hopefully, I mean, hopefully I'll stay employed. Who knows? But I, for me personally, and I know this is not the case for many, many writers, that gives me a degree of freedom to, I think, take my time. I don't want to take another 7 years to write a book, but knowing myself, I might. I just did an event with a writer last night, and I spent so long preparing for it because anything I do is actually, it follows the same totally inefficient process of getting like all of these thoughts and then somehow trying to wrangle them. And I'm much slower at this than I think most people are. And so, anyway, I think I'm going to have to do that again unless I somehow land on a much smoother, I don't know, technique or something. Um, but it seems unlikely. And one thing I, one thing I've learned is that even if you write a book, you have to relearn how to write books all over again. It doesn't actually uh, make it any easier. One thing I do have is the knowledge that I did finish one, and so possible that I could do it again. And so that's also really comforting. So yeah, not too much pressure, but I don't know if that's a good thing. For me it is, but I don't know if like for my career it is.
I don't know. It sounds like a very relaxed, healthy approach to
It's also not relaxed, but it is
it.
separate from external. I think it's more separate from external pressure. The pressure is mostly coming from this guy. Yeah.
Understand that. Great. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you, Lisa. All right. I will save the last question for me, and it's actually, where am I? It's actually not a writing question. I'm gonna go full circle to where we started. So we have been talking about how difficult it is for both of us to both write and paint at the same time. And how it's been about 17 years now since you were making visual art, and you're at this big breathing spot before you find what you want to do. Are you going to go back to your painting? Is that
Yeah, so one fun thing I did with my advance is I bought an iPad. It's like crazy. Um, and I downloaded Procreate, which is a drawing program, and I started just to, very low stakes. I'm not wasting any paper, like nice paper. And I started drawing, in recent months on that, and it's been really fun. I don't have to show it to anybody. It's been so long that my skills have really atrophied. So I'm kind of learning that from scratch. I'm taking a screenwriting class also very randomly, just as something new to try out to see if I like it. And I think this beginner mode for both of these forms is yeah, it's kind of related. It takes the pressure off. It's like, well, who am I as an artist? And it doesn't matter if it's really bad. Like, let me just have a sense of play that I've been missing for a long time. So yeah, I'm getting there.
and
I've
how
enjoyed
are
flowers
you,
too. I don't know if any of you probably locally went to the Ruth Asawa show at SF MoMA, but that just blew my mind, and I have been obsessed with flowers and looking at them and looking at other people's renderings of them, but also trying my own hand at them. I had no interest in flowers as in my younger years, and so that's been one way back in. Yeah, and I hope I
is
don't.
that what you're doing on your iPad? You doing flowers at the
I
moment?
do them on my iPad, and I also do them on paper. Yeah, they're worth
Really?
paper.
Nice. Very nice. Well, thank you so much for your time with us.
Oh,
And
thank you for inviting me to speak with you. Your questions are really wonderful, and thank you to everyone for being here with us. It's such a pleasure to meet you, and yeah, I am wishing you all the best with your writing because that's what we all need.
yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
And keep in touch. And for sure I'll let everyone know about the retreat coming up. And when you've got your 1 year workshop scheduled, let me know about that too.
Yeah, I will. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Okay. Thanks,
Looking
Susanna.
forward to your novel too. Really excited to.
Oh, I'll definitely let you know when it comes out. All right. Good night.
Good night. Thanks,
Good night,
everyone.
everyone. Thanks for being here. See you next month.